God gave rock and roll to you. Gave rock and roll to you. Put it in the soul of everyone.
I can't hate her enough. I know I don't. She's on a scheming, deceiving spree. She'll cut you down to your knees. She is the epitome of hate. Now is the time for us to escape. Sorcery is her way of control. We've lingered here. It's time to go out of her shadow. There's a new tomorrow, 'cause death is all she knows. She knows.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Area 312. And friends, once in a while, you come across a new band that makes you pause and consider these are ones to watch. We've come across a wonderful band. They're called McKenna. They're out of Illinois. Guys, Mike, Rex, I know you all have heard it as well. I'm really digging McKenna. I'm digging this album. It's Kristine and Brian. Kristine and Brian, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
McKenna, to me, it features melodic and alluring female fronted lead vocals. What I mean by that, Kristine, your vocals are not harsh, they're not brash or anything. You're a melodic singer, and your vocals are meet the skillfully performed classic metal guitar that Brian plays, and you both are backed by an ace rhythm section on this album right here. Are you ready? The lyrics, to my ears, they're very tastefully executed, and to me, they stem from a Christian worldview. So, friends, if you're in the mood for something new, this is it right here. So, once again, welcome, Brian and Kristine. Glad to have you.
Do you hear the cold heart demands? Will you be moved by an angry man? It's about learning the truth. Never easy, never easy.
Brian and Kristine, let me just ask you some questions then. Please tell us, if you don't mind, how did you two meet, and how has music played a significant role in your relationship?
Well, we met really at church. We think about 16, I was 15, and we weren't actually in church, but we were at my brother's place, and he was listening to some music, and so it was just like, oh, hello, it was kind of casual, and we started a friendship through the years. We weren't interested in each other really at that time until much later.
Yeah, we're good friends for probably 7 years, 10 years.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where it started. So, but we were both into music. Christian music had been taken off and very popular as far as like Cornerstone festivals, and we were going to those and with all our friends. So and we were musicians, but didn't really do anything together till much later. But yeah.
So based on what you just said, then, did you guys both grow up in the church, or how did your upbringing go?
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian family. the youngest of four. My older brothers and sisters, all Christians. So, a strong influence there, especially in Christian music of various genres. Brian did not until later. But
Yeah, so my story, which again relates to some of the different artists in the Christian music, was that probably from 7th, 8th grade, like a lot of kids, music became, between that and sports, that was all I did. School was definitely not a priority. So music was very strong. And so everything from what you guys have history with, whether it was Sabbath, Zeppelin, all that type of stuff. And then probably when I was in 8th grade, my aunt, whose life had radically changed probably 3 or 4 years earlier, and our family thought she was pretty out there. She met Jesus for the first time. And we have a Catholic background, Irish Catholic family. So, but this was a little different. And so she actually gave me for Christmas Resurrection Band DMZ. And when I heard I was getting a Christian rock album, I wanted nothing to do with it. And my mother's like, you will take it and you don't have to listen to it, but, be respectful. And so I think she gave my older brother a Phil Keaggy album. And, curiosity got to me. I put it on. I think the first Military Man was the first song. I'm like, wow. Then I think the second song was maybe Reluctance with Wendy singing. And I was like, yeah. And then third song was White Noise. And I became a fan. And probably a year later, my aunt took myself and a couple friends to a Res Band concert in Chicago. And I believe that's where they were recording the live bootleg album. And so, became a fan. And then, of course, Glenn Kaiser's preaching, he doesn't, he calls it how it is. And he preaches the gospel. And took a couple of times hearing him and then going to Cornerstone where, finally understanding that Jesus wants to have a personal relationship. And so we have a lot of history with Glenn and a great respect for him and his ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love remains. Take my breath away. You stay the same. Turn my night into the day.
Brian, your aunt's the one who purchased the Res album for you and Phil Keaggy for your sibling?
Yep. My brother never listened to it, and that Phil Keaggy album became mine.
She had great taste. Your aunt had great taste. And then with the live bootleg, so you were present at the concert. So that was your recording debut.
Yeah.
I can pick you out in the audience. I'll listen for you.
Yes. Yep.
So that's wonderful. Well, that said, Kristine, who are some of your vocal influences?
Well, I think in the beginning, which I was singing at a very young age, I'd have to say probably Debbie Boone was my first wow, you light up my life. Yep. That was huge for me. And I was probably 7 years old at the time.
I still sing that one today, but
I would sing it on the school bus until everyone was telling me to shut up. But then as I got more into music, different artists I would say Margaret Becker. I always loved her voice.
Kathy Tricoli.
Yeah, Kathy Tricoli, some of that, or CCM. I wasn't big into the real hard rock when it was coming around for a while, but and there weren't a lot of women singers in that at the time either, except for maybe like Servant or
Yep.
remember
Sandy Brock.
that? Yeah. So then I was like, oh, okay, girls can rock too. Um, and yeah, I would say those were some of the beginning ones, but yeah.
And you're right. There's a handful of the really, really rockers. There was Sandy Brock from Servant, Wendy Kaiser, of course. Did y'all know from Barnabas, Nancy Jo Mann? Have y'all heard of her?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. When I first started, listening to Christian rock, I became pretty desperate looking for heavy guitar. So I remember I bought an Imperials album, and there was actually 2 tracks that had electric guitar, and I'm like, wait, I think I hear some distortion, because it was, there wasn't a lot out there. That's a year later is when I think you had bands like Barren Cross and Bloodgood, of course, Striper, that were the stuff that I was hungry for. So I was looking for anything that represented anything close to what I came from. A couple of my early bands was, I think, After Res, Daniel Band,
Yeah.
and saw that was probably my second show where Daniel Band was opening for Larry Norman, if you can imagine that. So that was probably my second Christian concert.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, who were some of your guitar influences then?
I'm a guitar freak, so the list is really forever. But Michael Schenker, of course, great guitar player. But really, most of myself is probably rooted in classic rock to hard rock. So whether it's 70s, 80s, we're huge King's X fans from the 90s, late 80s. So really, everything and anything under the sun. From them.
How did you get started playing guitar, Brian? How did that happen?
Had a couple of, friends that one was playing bass and another one was playing drums. And, probably 7th grade, 2 huge albums for me was Billy Squier, Don't Say No, and Van Halen, Fair Warning. That was my introduction to Van Halen. So,
And what an album to be introduced by. I mean,
yeah.
You got Eddie venturing into all this experimental territory, So.
And then of course, I grew up influenced, my brother influenced, some of the stuff that I was listening to, which, that's where the Zeppelin, whether it was Aerosmith. So just guitar driven rock is really.
Sure.
So started at probably 7th, 8th grade and just did what kids do, right? Played in local bands and most of the time never got out of the garage. Did that through high school.
When did you first hear of the band Trouble? And the reason why I asked that, Brian, is because I noticed on let's see here, I believe it's Love Remains. You're wearing your video for Love Remains. You're wearing a Trouble shirt. I was checking it out. I'm like, Brian's wearing a Trouble shirt. So any love for Bruce Franklin and Rick Wartell?
Oh yeah, So there's Chicago band. They are one of the ones that had a little bit more success in the Chicago scene. So I was definitely a big fan of those first 2 albums. Again, that heavy, dark guitar, and I loved Jeff Olson, Ole's playing, solid. So A few years later, it was actually at Cornerstone, probably the second or third year. We went. I had been to pretty much every Cornerstone except for maybe one, sometime in the '90s. But the second or third year, it was still up north from Chicago before they had purchased that land down in Macomb, was it? Or yeah.
So,
And so I met Jeff there, and I got to spend a little time with him talking. And he had, I think he had shared that, that Bruce Franklin was, that God was doing stuff. And so a couple years later, I was playing with a local kind of a thrash metal band called Keeper here in Chicago. And we did shows with, actually we did a show in Valparaiso, Indiana with Guardian from their first album with the original singer. Did stuff with Sacred Warrior, which those guys were great. As a high school kid they would have a Bible study and stuff. And again, just really great people to be around.
Refresh my memory, guys. Sacred Warrior was out of Illinois, right?
Yeah, West Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay. That slipped my mind, but now that you're mentioning it, I'm like, yeah, those guys were from Illinois as well. So very cool. So friends out there, in case you haven't guessed it, McKenna, they are based out of Illinois. So, you got Rez, you got Whitecross, yeah, you had Trouble, Sacred Warrior. So good.
Trytan too, I think is he.
Oh yes.
From the
Yes.
suburbs of yeah. So had a little history with them again. Just so it was as we got introduced to all the Christian bands, it was just such a small group of people, right? So all of a sudden you'd go to a Daniel Band, Larry Norman show, and you meet these guys, and that's how we met Sacred Warrior, and how we ended up meeting the Trytan guys. So it's just kind of a small group of people that are following all these different bands around and having relationships. How we got a relationship with Bruce was. There's a church still there. Randy Schoaf is the pastor of it, been a pastor of it from the beginning, called Warehouse Church in Aurora, Illinois. Just sweetheart of a man. And many bands have come through there. John Thompson, True Tunes has relationships with them. And so Bruce was, at that time, I think that's where he was fellowshipping at. And we were rehearsing, band Keeper was rehearsing in the basement of the church. And a couple of the guys were fellowshipping at that church. And we got to meet Bruce there. And again, Bruce was just great, real supportive. And one of the first shows we ever did as band Keeper was opening for Trouble. And that was all because of Bruce. He got us that gig, and just a great guy. Seen him here and there over the years. He talked about, I think him and Doug are possibly talking about doing another album, which I think we would all like to hear that.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, Super Shine was a great album they did back then. It's hard to believe that's 22 years ago, back in 2000. They did that.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about Are You Ready? Let's talk about this album, because I'm ready to talk about this album. How long did the album take to complete, guys, when y'all first initially started on this?
We've had a few of the songs we were performing probably for the last 5-6 years. The actual recording was probably done over 2.5 to 3 year period. So we had probably 3 or 4 of the songs. And then once we started recording, we started the writing procedure. And we kind of knew the lanes we wanted this to be in. So, we had done a couple CDs under a different name before. It made sense for us to change, because anytime people would go look for us under this name, there was 3 or 4 other bands that also had that name. Some band in Hawaii had the same name. There was a death metal band actually from Chicago that had the name. Yeah. So it was a little awkward when people would go to their website and say, wait a minute, something doesn't look right here. Yeah. So we kind of knew when recording this and writing for it, what lane we wanted this to be in. We wanted there to be a consistency Very important for us. Again, guitar, drums, bass. I think there's one song that has keyboards on it. Otherwise, what you're hearing is all guitar, drums, bass, and vocals. And that's the lane that McKenna is.
Did you record with analog or digital, Brian?
A lot of analog, ultimately digital, but everything that we did, we went into a real deal, not just a home studio. We went into a studio that had a drum room, and because again, we've done recordings in the past, and probably one of the biggest challenges is just getting good drum sounds, and certainly to do that for us, we had to make that investment, go into a real studio. So everything that we have is, either a wall of Marshalls, bass, everything is recorded. There's nothing cut and spliced. We're playing guitar from the beginning to the end. And of course, if there's a mistake, you try to fix that.
Right.
Ultimately it's still all done digitally. And then of course, guitars, basses, and stuff like that, we were able to do in our home studio, which we have.
Was it a smooth flow, or any Spinal Tap moments or anything, or?
Well, there's always Spinal Tap moments, and you can get that when the DVD comes out. Kidding. But no, we actually went into a studio and we had recorded probably 7, 8 songs in that studio. And probably a year went by and I was over a period of time recording the rest of that. And we ended up going to another studio to record another 6 songs. And we really liked how that turned out. And so we were trying to work with both. And eventually we came to determination that, what we recorded in the original studio, we want to redo it. And so we went back and recorded the drums at the same studio the second time around. And that's why there's a real consistency, I think, throughout. So the gentleman who was engineering owned the studio. Great job. Unfortunately, the studio just recently closed their doors just with COVID. And, he had been studio had been around in Chicago for 25 years. So it's.
Yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah,
well,
he's still doing stuff, and he actually was the one who did the mixing on it as well. So he's still working. We still do. He's doing some stuff with T.D. Clark right now, who's another musician that I play with.
Well, my hat is off to him and to all you guys who perform, because I asked the question because the quality on this is 2 thumbs up all the way. I think Mike said it at the onset. This is a professional recording, and it's wonderfully done. My hat's off to all you guys, to the engineer, and the production.
Let's go for a ride. Let's go for a ride. Let's go for a ride. Yeah.
The contents on this, I'm just going to call it deceptively heavy. And the reason why I say that is because we have a wonderful juxtaposition. Kristine, your vocals, again, they're melodic. I don't really know how to describe them. They are inviting. They're not brash or harsh or grating. They're melodic, and you sing across some pretty slamming musical passages. It's like you hear it, and it's like, Rex and I were talking the other day, and it's like, man, did you hear this part in this song? And it's like, we came to the conclusion, Brian, you're a shredder on guitar, and that's good, that. And so it's
and I also think sometimes when you can't just when you're talking to someone about a new band and you can't just say, well, they sound like band X or band Y, when you can't just say that, I think to me that's a sign of a really great artist or band, when you have a hard time describing kind of what they sound like, and that's where I think you guys fit in. You can't just say, well, you sound like this or you sound like that. It's sort of in a good way hard to explain without listening to it, what you sort of sound like. Because like Kent says, there's times where you're just wailing on the guitar, Brian, and then, Kristine's vocals are, sometimes I swear I hear a little bit of heart influence there with her vocals and stuff. So it's very, in a good way, hard to explain exactly what I would call your style of music, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's what we want to hear. I mean, we feel like we have something original, that it's not just cookie cutter.
It is.
We've already heard before.
So that begs the question, what do you call your style of music? In your own words, how would you describe your product on this? I don't want to say product, that sounds silly. How would you describe your craft, your art on this album, Are You Ready?
I'd be interested to see how Kristine answers that one.
I guess the first thing that always comes to my mind is melodic rock, with a bit of a edge to it, because some songs are a bit heavier than just your typical rock. So
Yeah, we are a hard rock band, and Kristine doesn't know how to sing other than being melodic, and that's what I think makes her voice great.
And that's good, yes.
Yeah, she could sing the phone book and it'll sound good. So,
Aw.
yeah.
Who are you? Do you know all that you've been created for? No mistakes, don't be afraid. Push the world out the door. Push the world out the door.
Why don't each of us talk about a song on the album that has kind of stood out to us, and maybe talk about why, or maybe they can give us a little bit of the story on any particular song that has really stood out to each of us. So like Kent, is there a song on the album in particular that has stood out to you, like, wow, I really dig it?
Sure. Just at first, first glance here, if I can read, because my eyes. Love Remains, Time to Go, Are You Ready? Push the World Out, and let's go for a ride.
That's cheating, man.
I absolutely, I really do. I love this. There's nothing on here that I do not dislike. There are like 5 songs that I especially just really gravitate to, and that's great. I'm going to save my answer though, because I want to go in depth with a couple songs as we continue. So Mike and Rex, you pick it up, and then I'll bring up the rear, as they say.
Okay, well, I'll go next if you don't mind. I'm going to go with track 5, Come As You Are. There's hard driving guitars at the beginning, Brian, and that song, it kind of reminds me of the 90s. It's just kind of I hate to use the word grungy, but that song just has a grungy feel the whole way through. That is one of my favorite tracks on the album.
Oh, very cool. One thing I love about having different people listening to it is that it's great to hear, somebody else pick out. Because I know for me, that's one of my, probably one of my favorite songs that we do live, especially because, again, when typically the shows that we're doing, if we're fortunate enough, we get to open up for some national acts local here, like Last in Line, which is Vivian Campbell, the Ronnie James Dio band. We did a show with them earlier in the year. And so we're playing to their audience. And for me, that's just a great song. Because again, we're not coming up on stage preaching, but clearly, lyrically, that one for me, Come As You Are. So I one of my favorite songs to play.
how is the response from the crowd? I know they probably don't know you and that, Brian, when you're up there, but exactly. But how is the response to that song? They probably like that just because of the guitar sounding and all that, correct?
It's interesting. You talk to musicians who do original music, right? It's really tough to go, most places that are having live music, they're looking for the 80s cover bands, the Bon Jovi tribute bands.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, so trying to do original music in a club, you start off playing for 12 people and you finish the night playing for the bartender and the waitress. So for us, it's been really good because we feel that usually they're very pleasantly surprised with, they're seeing an opener who's playing primarily original music. We throw a few covers in there, but 90% of it's original. And, with the musicians that we got, we really try to bring it and make it a show. So it's gone over quite well for us.
Good.
The world is changing right before our eyes. We've fallen off the slide.
Okay, so for me, the one that really immediately stood out to me and has continued to stand out to me is Push the World Out. I absolutely love that song. It's got a great hook in the chorus, but it goes through all these changes as the song progresses, and and that's one of the things I like about your music in general, is it's not just, straight ahead kind of, you get the verse and the chorus and the songs really progress through changes, and that helps make them more interesting. That's particularly true with this song. And then it comes to that chorus that's just a really great hook. And then you've got the whole message here, which is about living into your identity in Christ, rather than letting the world govern who you are. And it just, I don't know, everything about the song works for me. So, I don't know.
Great. That's great.
Yeah, I think in writing, artistically, we try not to be predictable. Obviously, you've got, in our case, 5 to 6 minutes to write a song. We're not doing 3.5-minute songs. But again, just trying to, go out of the box a little bit. Yeah, that's what I like to listen to. That's what catches my ear. So we try to be creative that way.
Can I ask what inspired this song?
Well, I think one of the bigger things was just how in our current climate of people just with the whole gender identity issues, that children they're not growing up in a secure place where they are affirmed in who they are. And there's just, there's so much confusion and questions and an environment that children and really no one should be subject to. Life is hard enough. And then you're also questioning like everything else that should not really be a question.
Yeah.
So that's where it kind of spurred from. So.
Brian, are you doing more of the music and maybe, or how does it work between the two of you?
Yeah, so I'll do a lot of writing, whether it's coming up with riffs or just structuring some music. And then, or it could be as simple as just picking up an acoustic guitar and saying, hey, and giving Kristine an opportunity. What is sometimes I'll have some melodic ideas already, but usually 9 out of 10 times she'll come up with something even better. So I'll usually let her have a shot at it. Say, what are you hearing? And usually we kind of just take off that way. And then a lot of times we'll bring it to the band and kind of work through some stuff rehearsal wise, and then kind of refine as we go through.
And how about lyrically, Kristine? Are you doing more of that, or how's that?
Yeah, for the most part. And I'll run some things by him, say, what do you think, how this comes together? Because sometimes I'll get stumped, or like I'll have some of the verses figured out, but then the chorus is just like, I don't know where to go with this or how to pull it together. So I do bounce off a lot of ideas with him. And so, yeah, and a lot of it is just through inspiring either things that I've heard through church or conversations I've had with friends, or
what's going around in the world.
Yeah, some of those things. So, yeah.
So I'd like to say, before I get into a couple songs, I would like to really go in a little more depth with, but just want to say, let's talk about kind of do a show and tell here. And I just want to say, Brian, that your guitar tone to me is the perfect fine grained sandpaper. It's got grit. I love it. Friends, if you're a fan of classic metal, the good stuff, right? 70s and 80s, then you will love Brian's guitar tone. This is a nice digipack. Here's the front. And let me ask you all, this right here, the art going across, is that kind of like maybe the sky is a scroll that's going to open up, and it talks about the sky being a scroll? Is that what we're looking at with Are You Ready?
Yeah,
Sure.
it's
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
So interesting thing is that's actually a picture of a road near our house.
Okay.
And I took a picture of it after it had rained. So there's a reflection of the rain in the road. And there was a very interesting cloud formation there. And I thought, it kind of looks like, could be something useful for a band picture. And then my brother is an artist. And so he did some little tweaking of it, took another picture that someone had taken of, it's actually a trap door that opens up to a basement, but we put it in the sky as kind of like what you said, like it's like something about to open. So it is a bit of a different looking thing there, but
Yeah, well, I'm like, okay, what's, I believe just like songs, every picture's a story, in some
Absolutely.
some way. And so, friends, here's as Rex and Mike were showing, you open it up, and then it actually opens into a trifold. There's Kristine laughing at Brian, who's putting his hair back, and anyway. So also,
It was windy that day. Okay.
so the CD's it's housed in here, and then, friends, you also get, if I can do this on camera, you also get a nice lyric booklet.
get a
And
paper
so
card.
that's a little additional bonus. Regarding some of the music, friends, there's light and shade with McKenna's music. You know what I mean by that. There's quite a bit of heavy, and then there's also some differentiation, some clean parts in there. Give it light and shade, heavy versus clean composition. There are twists and turns with time signature changes within. That's what I love about this. It's art, and it's done very well.
And made a special place just for you. Singing infest your host like a parasite, seductive exploits and murder.
I'd like to get into a couple songs in specific. One of them is the song Time to Go. And Brian, I mentioned this to you. I absolutely love the intro to Time to Go because you're playing these notes that to me are kind of bouncy notes. They're kind of quirky. And I mean that in a good way, meaning they're atypical. At first I'm like, is this Steely Dan? It has some, just some, it's just so atypical. And then we get into some jamming, Kristine, your vocals on Time to Go. I dig it's a low sung build, and you've got this lyrical groove that you're doing with the rhythm, and I dig it, and it builds up into the chorus. You all have a video for Time to Go. So Kristine, I'd like to ask you, if I may, in whatever you choose to convey, what are you saying in the video? Because there's a mask and you're holding a lantern, you kind of have a costume on. What are y'all conveying with that?
Well, yeah, it took some thinking as far as how to portray the song in a video. But in wearing that dark mask, and it's an evil, and it's like the evil is walking the streets. It's out there. And so I'm walking around the city of Chicago for the most part in that. And at the same time, at the end, the evil is running away. But also I am the one dressed up in the evil. So it's kind of a play on it. It's out there, but it's also here. And it's something I have to deal with in my own life and get out of it when it's out there, like not subjecting myself to it, but also knowing that I have it here, in whatever, level that is. So, without self-righteousness, looking at something as, yeah, that's evil, but I have some level of that evil in myself that I have to deal with and get rid of daily.
So whenever the evil in the video was running, y'all must have reached Japusa and started running. I'm teasing. Friends out there, and if y'all don't mind, Brian and Kristine, I'd like to read the lyrics to this song and then compare it with something, if I may.
Sure.
If y'all would allow me. So from Time to Go, friends, from the album, Hell made a special place for you. Still you infest your host like a parasite. Seductive exploits and murderous rage made the prophets run and your husband afraid. I can't hate her enough, I know I don't. She's on a scheming, deceiving spree. She'll cut you down to your knees. She is the epitome of hate. Now is the time for us to escape. Sorcery is her way of control. We've lingered here, it's time to go out of her shadow. There's a new tomorrow, because death is all she knows. Her story hasn't changed, just the face that it comes in. Tore down her house with all living in it, trampled underfoot, the dogs ate her flesh, lapped up her poison till there was nothing left. Now, friends, those lyrics to me are metal lyrics.
The story hasn't changed, just the face that it comes in. Tore down a house with all living in it, trampled underfoot, the dogs ate her flesh, lapped up her poison till there was nothing left.
I'd like to read something, and this is my sword of the Lord here. This is, if I can read it, 2 Kings 9, beginning with verse 30. Now remember, here's some key words, y'all. Trampled underfoot, the dogs ate her flesh. I couldn't help but think of something here in 2 Kings 9:30. When Jehu reached Jezreel and Jezebel heard of it, she put on eye makeup, fixed her hair, and looked out the window. Jehu came through the city gate, and Jezebel asked, "Are you here in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master?" Looking up at the window, he said, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 officers looked out toward him. He said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down. Some of her blood splashed onto the wall and the horses, and she was trampled underfoot. They went to bury her, but found no more of her than her skull, feet, and hands. So they came back and told him. He said, "This is what the Lord said through his servant Elijah from Tishbe. In the field of Jezreel, the dogs will eat the flesh of Jezebel. Jezebel's corpse in the field of Jezreel will be like dung on the ground, unrecognizable as Jezebel." Am I on the right track?
Oh yeah. Exactly. The some of the things that we're dealing with in the world today is that spirit of Jezebel. I mean, you just flip on your television, it's not hard to see it if you have eyes to see it. So that is pretty much what all of what that song is talking about. And so
And the key is, where that stuff can be all in each one of us. And we need God to give us eyes to be able to see it so that we can deal with it and call it what it is.
yeah.
That's right. If I may, I'd like to, and I won't be as long-winded with this one, but Mike, I Pushed the World Out. Like you, I absolutely love that song, among others that I love. Let me, if I may, reflect on 2 little verses here. Push the world out. Double-mindedness will make you mad. Let me read this from James 1:5-8. Let me get my bearings here. Oh, I need some glasses. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in trust, doubting nothing. For the doubter is like a wave in the sea, being tossed and driven by the wind. Indeed, that person should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord, because he is double-minded, unstable in all his ways. So double-mindedness will make you mad. And then your house won't stand long in sinking sand is what you all sing in the lyrics there in Matthew 7:24-27. Jesus talking here, Yeshua. He says, "So everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a sensible man who built his house on bedrock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them," says Yeshua, Jesus, "will be like a stupid man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the rivers flooded, the wind blew and beat against that house, and it collapsed, and its collapse was horrendous."
Double-mindedness will make you mad. Your house won't stand long in sinking sand.
Was I on the right track? Because I'm picking these things up from your lyrics, and it's wonderful, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where those came from. And just more with just knowing who we are, and what your foundation is as a believer, and how that can be unshakable, even when the world is going crazy and there's just so much uncertainty. But having your trust in the Lord, it can be unshakable, and you can be in the midst of those times and still have joy and still have the right mind and not be so unsettling and confused and deceived. So it's more on that theme. So
You said earlier that you guys started out with a few songs, maybe 3, that you kind of built this album with. What were the first songs that you had there?
Love Remains.
Love Remains.
Um,
What's a Normandy song?
We have these other names for the songs because we didn't have titles for the longest time. So
So one was,
it's either the key it's in or
yeah.
some other made up thing.
Let's Go for a Ride we've had for a while, right?
Yeah, let's go for a ride.
But the other one is Can't Live Without.
Yeah, that's what it is. Can't live without.
Those 3 songs have been around for probably 5 years.
Yeah.
What's interesting about, if I can say something about Time to Go, is that that was the last song we recorded for the album. And the whole time, when I brought that song to the band and we're working on it, Kristine just kept on saying, that song, it needs to be an instrumental.
Yeah.
Because she couldn't hear anything
I got nothing.
melodic on it. And so she went into that song kicking and screaming that it should be an instrumental.
Kicking and screaming.
At least kicking, maybe not screaming. But then, we sat down and there were some things that I was hearing, and then she was able to build on that. And that became, again, for a lot of people, that's some of their favorite.
Oh yeah, it's a standout.
Yeah.
Let me make mention before moving along here. Barry Kleiber is performing bass and Scott Albert performing drums on the videos. Now, is it Stephen James Tabor and David Brown who are performing on the album?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Stephen, he's we played with him for 20 years. When he first started playing drums as a teenager, he's always done musical stuff with us in some capacity, and he's part of the worship team at our church. So he's been playing a long time, really solid. So we worked out most of the songs with him. He's played with us for the last probably 5 years as we've come up with new songs. For when we've done shows, sometimes we'll use other drummers. Steven's just not built to put his gear in a car and drive 50 miles to go play, a hole in the wall somewhere. So that's not really his thing. But he's been with us for, like I said, 20 years. And David Brown, bass player, fellow musician, worship team, part of a worship team at another church. And he's just been always a big supporter of us, what we've done musically. We've played with him for at least 10 years. And so he's one of the guys that will travel all around and listen to us and work with us on our songs and stuff like that. So just a great guy. He just recently, once the album was just about done, him and his family moved to the Carolinas. So that's why he's out of the picture. Barry has been, I play with him in a TD Clark band. We've been bandmates for literally 10, 12 years. And so it was just natural that when David wasn't available, that he would be our guy. And he's a great guy, great musician.
Hear our voices as we sing our choices as we choose to live today. Hear our voices as we sing our choices as we choose to live today. Yeah.
Now, with the TD Clark band, Brian, we need to talk about, you all have opened up for Michael Schenker, as we were discussing, a few times. Just tell us about getting to do that. I mean,
yeah, he's he's a instrumental artist, so very much in the vein of a lot of those neoclassical guys. Definitely more of coming from the rock background, but he's just a great player. And I got hooked up with him actually through Barry Kleiber. I was playing with another artist, and we needed a bass player to sub for a show. I think it was at the Cubby Bear in the city. And so he filled in for us. And after meeting myself, he's like, wow, you'd be the perfect guitar player to go with TD. And so ever since probably 3-4 months later, I started playing with TD, and he does some, not a lot, but he does a decent amount of national stuff. So he's got some endorsements, and we'll go out to the NAMM show, and that's where we'll go out to do some shows out in LA, things like that. And we've been fortunate enough to play with some pretty big hitters, whether it's Michael Schenker. We've done several shows with Uli John Roth, another fabulous player. We did a East Coast tour, probably, I don't know how many years ago it was, but Yngwie Malmsteen kind of tried to do that Guitar Gods tour. So it was, we were the opener, and I think Gary Hoey was part of it, Bumblefoot, who was playing with Guns N' Roses. And that guy is just a sweetheart of a guy. Many stories just how great of a guy he is. But so yeah, we did probably maybe 14 shows going up the East Coast and into Canada with Yngwie, and we've done a few in the city with him too. So we've been pretty fortunate to be able to do to meet some of those guys and meet some of the heroes that we were listening to in high school. For sure, Michael Schenker and Uli John Roth, some of that early Scorpion stuff.
Yeah.
From guitar playing wise, just great guitar.
Very
And
cool.
then you guys have some shows, I think, scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, right? Are you got some shows coming up later on this year?
We're supposed to do with TD Clark. We're supposed to go out and do some shows with Paul Gilbert out in LA. I don't know if that's happening now, but as far as us, we're waiting to hear from a few, because again, a lot of times they end up being last minute. Nationals coming through, and
Sure.
do they have an opener? Do they want an opener?
Okay.
So we're trying. Ideal situation for us is that, because again, for us, it's being able to get in front of people, right? And how do you get in front of people? Opening up for somebody that has a draw.
Right.
And so, we would love to be able to get onto some type of national act, to be able to get out on the road and do some more shows. That's what we'd like to do.
Hear our voices as we sing our choices as we choose to live today. Let's go for a ride, yeah. Let's go for a ride. Let's go for a ride. Let's go for a ride.
I have one more song I'd like to ask about. The last song on the album, Wild Water. It's a little different. It's a very catchy song. I really enjoyed it, but it's a little different in style. But I really, just tell me about this song. It talks about Ireland, and I assume you have a heritage with that, with your name being what it is. So yeah, just talk to me about this song. I'd like to hear what inspired this one.
Well, heritage, yep. 3 of my grandparents all came over from Ireland. But as far as, musically, again, that's a little bit different, right? Some of the other stuff.
Mhm.
And so we have, as I think guys have seen, we, do some acoustic stuff, and that can run the gamut as far as styles, so we're not, with McKenna, we want to stay in this lane. This is who McKenna is. And, but we will do other musical stuff. So that was one of the songs that kind of, we brought into the fold. We have other stuff like that, but I'll let you talk about as far as this lyrically on that, if you want to.
Well, we had been to Ireland on a family vacation with his mother and aunts. And so after the trip, we're looking through the pictures, and he's playing this chord progression. And I just kept thinking about the trip and the different things that we saw. And so I started throwing in just different things about Ireland into a melody. And then the chorus part that talks about the wells and the mine went blank, but the chorus part is mainly about the saints of Ireland,
Yeah, Patrick.
like Patrick
Born
and
against Patrick.
Bridget, and how evangelism was. They had a huge birth of evangelism come out of Ireland that went all over the world, and so that is mainly what the choruses are pointing to.
Yeah, I like that you put this one in there, because it does show a different side of what you can do. And, and it's stylistically different, and yet it's still a very catchy song. I really, like I say, enjoyed it. So I'm glad you put that in there.
Yeah, it's like an Easter egg because,
Yeah.
I was like, boy, this song Homecoming is 12 minutes long. I'm like, I got to check this one out. And it's like, okay, that song ends. And then I'm like, okay, well, something's going to happen here. And then that song starts. So it's kind of like, if you listen to the whole album, you get a nice little surprise there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like, and I like what David Brown did bass playing wise on it. It really kind of
Yes.
a nice groove on that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like it.
Friends, incidentally, before I do forget to say this, McKenna does have a YouTube channel, and they have a website, mckennaband.com, and of course a Facebook page. We will post the links to all three of those in the description below. So please check it out and go to mckennaband.com or on Facebook and snag one of these great albums. On your YouTube channel, though, Brian and Kristine, I noticed, I was checking out kind of your acoustic sing-along material, the intimate settings that y'all do there with the acoustic. Y'all do some Iona covers, Fleming and John, Charlie Peacock, Ken Hill, and the choir. And I do have a familiarity with each of those. And so what's interesting to note is the musical spectrum of these acoustical intimate performances and the personal listening with some of these artists juxtaposed with the electric output on the Are You Ready album. Y'all have a pretty wide variety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what really the whole acoustic thing, over the last 20 years, we've always done, coffee houses and things like that. So that's not anything new, but what really we started doing, I think for a while, we were doing one video a week during COVID. Everybody got locked down, we're at home. And so I think we did it was a Sunday night thing, which sometimes it wouldn't happen until Monday at about 1 a.m. in the morning because we hadn't done it. But so a lot of that was just that we would take some of our heavier songs and strip it down acoustically, or we would, again, we're huge fans of bands like Iona. They got such a deep wall of music themselves. So, and I think over the years, as we, when I was seventh, eighth grade, unless it was Judas Priest or AC/DC, I didn't want to be bothered with,
Right.
very narrow. And I think as we age, that's where, for me, Cornerstone was always, the first couple of years, that's where I got introduced to bands like Philadelphia. I think Jerusalem came there one time, so these were all the things that I was hungry for. But as we start having kids and getting older, all of a sudden, Over the Rhine, 77s, which good rock band, but then they were doing stuff like the Lost Dogs, which back in my teen years wouldn't have been my cup of tea. But I think you kind of expand. Innocent Mission would be another one that's a very unique sounding band that we're fans of.
Well, I totally get it. I'm fans of a lot of those bands, and like Mike and I were big Bob Dylan fans. Never would I thought when I was in high school that I would have been a Bob Dylan fan. You know, man, he's got some great stuff. And so.
Joker Man, one of my favorites of his.
What's that?
Joker Man.
Oh,
one of
yeah.
my
Yeah. Joker Man dance to the Nightingale tune. Bird fly high by the light of the moon. What about another album release? Are there any plans? Because guys, truly, this Are You Ready? For my listening experience, it's terrific. It was an honor. It was an honor to listen to this. I do hope another album's in the works. So where are we at regarding, when I say McKenna material, I'm talking about material such as this. Where are we at in the pipeline?
There was probably 3 or 4 songs that we had been writing that didn't maybe get finished that would definitely fall in line. We also have kind of resurrected 2 or 3 other songs from previous catalog that would fit nicely in, that I think that we could re-record. And then, we'd probably write some more, but I think we're probably a good year before we start diving into that. Because even though we created the album last year with COVID, things that we really haven't gotten out and been able to support it. So we're really looking for avenues for the next, 3 to 6 months to see what opportunities might come to get out there and support it.
Okay.
It's definitely for us, for me, especially artistically, there's nothing like getting out there and playing this stuff live. It's one thing to record it. And I think, even though we obviously layer multiple guitars there, I think where people have been pleasantly surprised is that the music really carries well over to the stage. So what was the band we just did with at the Forge? I forget the name. It's a newer band, Crowbot. We got to do a show with them not too long ago. And again, that they're a newer, heavy hard rock band, and I think it went over pretty well. So we're hoping to get out there and to be able to do more of that.
She is the epitome of hate. Now is the time for us to escape. Sorcery is her way of control. We've lingered here. It's time to go out of her shadow.
McKennaBand.com, and then on YouTube it's McKenna Music. Facebook it's McKenna Band. What's the best avenue, Kristine and Brian, for somebody who would be interested in checking this out and picking it up? What's the best avenue for them to score one of these, make a purchase?
If they go to the website, they can, there's an email link to email us. And then we can.
Or you can private message Facebook, right?
Yeah, or private message through Facebook is fine too. We don't have a cart on the website, so it's kind of
I believe you can get it at like Baby CD or some of those different places streaming. I think you can download it as well. But to me, it's nothing like having a physical copy of it.
Yeah, Apple Music or something like that. So
one cool story about, we had just done a show not too long ago, and a girl that was at that show had been at one of our first shows, and she had bought a CD after that show. And she didn't say this directly to us. She said it to one of the, I think one of the wives of one of the other players. I might have been, I don't know if it was Barry's, but it said, "Hey, wow, I love that CD. I put it in my car stereo, and I haven't taken it out since." Mm-hmm. And those are some of the people that will never, they're not going to hear Sacred Warrior. They're just not. So those are kind of some of the people we want to, being able to play for some nationals. You're able to get in front of people that would maybe never hear you, and who knows, what God will do with those songs. And so that for us, that was probably one of the more exciting things that came out of some of the last shows that we've done.
Very cool.
Yeah, I just would say, please check this out, because I do not think you'll be disappointed. Production is great. The songs are great. Kristine's vocals are wonderful, and Brian, he can rock. So I would highly recommend friends check this out, please.
Brian and Kristine, we toward the end of every episode, of course, we like to keep the main thing, and we all honor the Lord for his, well, being who he is and his gift of music. And Mike always takes us to scripture closeout. But we want to thank you both for being our special guest, and love your all's music. And thank you so much for fellowshipping with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we can't thank you guys enough. We love what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Look forward to every episode that you guys have been putting out, and they get better and better. So great job. And it's nice to get the deep dive and, some of the artists that we grew up with, and, the behind the scenes stuff. And I know most of those bands have pioneered, and it hasn't been an easy road by any means. So thank you guys for what you guys do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Mike's going to take us home, and when he finishes, please stick around for one more minute.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so in the spirit of the album title, I decided to take us to Matthew 24, starting in verse 42, which says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming, but know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect."
And the
Thank you,
description.
friends, for watching.
Hi, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
I was younger, think 17, thought I knew life. I was dreaming.
God gave rock and roll to you, gave rock and roll to you, put it in the soul of everyone.
Brian and Kristine, this has been an honor to have you, and friends out there. Thank you for watching. Please go check out Are You Ready? The descriptions for the links are below. What am I trying to say, Rex? The links to the
The links to the website and their Facebook page will be down below.
In the description.
Well, that's weird because I paid $30 for this. What are you talking about?
I was going to say, what you're saying is check is in the mail, right? We've heard that before.